But let's talk about my topic for today. And, what kind of sparked me or sparked this for me was, you know, um, over the past month, as we started digging into Huawei and issues going on with them, and we kind of talked about a lot of the things going on in the background with the trade war, and I try to be kind of careful with that because I don't want to get political, and I still don't ever want to get political with any of my podcasts. And this may be another one that kind of walks that line of being what some may be considered political, but it's not that. And the topic is, do we really want to see American-made smartphones? And for me, I'm all for supporting local businesses. For a number of reasons. One, well, I'm providing a business to my neighbor, and to me, that's a good thing because if I'm putting money in my neighbor's pocket, then in turn, we'll eventually be able to take that and reinvest it back in my pocket, and we'll basically be able to support each other and support more and more and more people in our community and see that community grow. As well as this, if I have a relationship with the neighbor or the person I bought something from, I'm hoping that equates to, well, as far as the overall business relationship, it being better than, one I may have with someone I don't know. Why? Because, well, with my neighbor, I'm thinking that they're not going to want to hear the whispers of people saying that, yeah, that person cheats them or cheats us. This person known for, being dishonest. So because they're not going to want that, they're more likely to be upfront, more helpful, more willing to work with you. And when you have that relationship with someone you see pretty much every day, that means that the product that you're getting had the potential to be better than anywhere else you're going to get it from, because of the simple fact that the person that's selling that product to you, and the person selling the product to you understands that, yeah, you're just someone like him that's just trying to make a living, trying to provide for the family, and you want to make sure whatever you buy, it lasts and it does what it's supposed to do. Now, let's be honest when we talk about companies and businesses and all that. Now, before I kind of continue on with that, I want to state this plain and clear. This is not a debate against or for labor unions. I can make arguments on both sides of it. I've seen areas where unions may have hurt businesses, but I've also seen areas where unions have come in and really done a great job for, providing protection for employees. Being able to help them deal with the situation, like providing fair wages. If anyone going to sit there and argue and say that a business, do not look after the business or number one for themselves and never cheated a person, we know that's not the case. And that had been where at times unions have come in and been a big help. But there have been times when unions have hurt businesses. So we've seen both sides of that. But this is not going to be one to debate one way or another. It's just we got to be frank when we talk about an American business, or let's be honest, a American smartphone manufacturer, and how that will be able to work. Well, because let's be honest, when we look at what we want out of a job, we want a fair wage that will allow me to support my families, provide the needs that we need as far as medical and dental insurance, as well as have maybe a few extra dollars in our pocket to be able to buy a few toys. At the end of the day, most people, as far as Americans want to be, we just want to be comfortable. And if we'll be honest, a lot of us, especially in this generation, we're not really feeling that real back-breaking work mentality or idea. Going out there and digging ditches and really coming in with the sore back and all that. Some will argue that the modern day Americans do not really have the heart for that like the Americans in the past. And if we really look back at what Motorola tried to do 5 years ago, trying to bring a business to Texas, it was a feel-good story. It sounded good. But really, we as Americans didn't support it. Now, it can be easily argued that, well, it wasn't that we wasn't trying to support it. It just, the advice they gave us didn't match what the market was selling. They gave us a phone, the Motorola X, a dual core phone, when you had quad core phones out there. I made that argument. I said, as much as this, I look forward to an American-made Motorola. When it was made available, I liked the idea that I could fully customize it. There's a lot of things about that phone I really love, but the one thing I couldn't get behind: how in the world were you selling a dual core phone when quad core was the incident? Now, I actually didn't have this in my notes, but this is something I'm kind of just came to my thought process now. Looking at then, because Motorola was just bought out by Google at the time when they was having this going on. They were kind of selling this, and you look at the phones now and the complaints I have with the Pixels now. My do these parallel each other? Because you look at the Pixel phones now, and my biggest complaint is that Google constantly put out phones that does not match up what the market is asking for. And here you are, you're looking at the Motorola, an American-made phone, that the reason why it didn't sell because the market was asking for a quad core, and you had Motorola putting out dual core phones. And even though they try to say, hey, listen, man, you're missing the fact that our dual core phones are able to perform up to the same standard as a quad core phone, people wasn't hearing that. When it came to specs, you had dual core and more manufacturers had quad core. Why would I spend money on your phone that you're charging at the same price as those guys over there when all you had to do was give us at least quad core? So at the end of the day, that phone bombed. In fact, we didn't see this phone really become successful until the price dropped. Now, once the price dropped right around that Black Friday deal, man, Motorola's website was crashing because it couldn't handle the demand. People were just storming the website trying to get the phone. And it really proved the fact that when it comes to selling a flagship phone, well, Motorola didn't feel like they could do that. In fact, that was the last time we saw Motorola as the Motorola we know. Eventually, that led to Google pretty much, stripping Motorola of the rights and properties they needed to protect themselves against all these frivolous lawsuits coming from Apple and all these other companies. And then they pretty much sold off the rest of it to Lenovo to pretty much go from there. Now, this is where I'm asking the question: will we ever be able to see an American company put out a smartphone that we're going to support? Because when you look at what we deal with here as far as American companies and what they don't have to deal with overseas. And if you take like companies like OnePlus, who's in China or in other countries, well, let's be honest. When you look at the cost of smartphones right now and how we as customers are starting to complain that we're starting to see these $1,200, $1,500 smartphones, and we're like, you guys need to kind of calm down with this. And OnePlus right now being appealing. Why? Because they're able to pretty much match the same specs that Samsung was matching for almost half the price. But you look at let's be honest, China's labor practices are not the same as here in the United States. When you look at American tech companies, right now they're centered around Silicon Valley. Well, the cost of living in San Francisco is crazy. I was there last year, and I left there saying, man, I don't know how the world they do it over there. How is it that you can make six figures over there and you could be considered in poverty, where the dream of American or owning a home is like within reach here in the rest of the states? Right there in San Francisco, the dream is to own an apartment, where there are a lot of people who are working 9-to-5 jobs, and making wages that would be more than enough to not only buy a house out here or in other parts of the country, but be able to have a decent living. Over there, that's not enough to be able to afford an apartment. There are a lot of people living out of their cars, and it's normal. So, as they say, there's a lot of middle-class poor people over there, or a lot of middle-class homeless people over there. And when you look at what it costs to, provide the talent in Silicon Valley, the cost for, really providing a decent wage there, of course, when it comes to a company like Google or Apple, that in order for them to support the people that are going to work there and to keep the talent there, well, it's going to cost them money, and they're having to pass those costs on to you. And that brings me to the question of how could we make an American company work here in the States where it can compete with Apple, with iPhone, it can compete with Samsung, with the Note. It can give us a better phone than what the Google can with the Pixel, and give us something similar to kind of the specs what OnePlus is able to do, but at a price point where people can afford it. And when I look back and kind of, brainstorm in a way that maybe you could maybe guide this into working, well, first thing first, location is going to be the big thing. You cannot have a factory or a location in a city like LA or San Francisco or New York. Cost of living is too high. And if the people that are working there can barely afford to live, they're going to demand more wages. And if they're demanding more wages, well, the manufacturer going to charge more money for you to be able to own a device. So location is going to be a big thing. So a place like Nashville, Atlanta, Texas, pretty much somewhere else other than those big cities that the cost of living is pretty high. The other thing is what talent. Where are you going to get the talent? Are you going to be able to, acquire the talent from, the local neighborhoods to assemble these phones, and are you going to be able to do so at a price that makes sense? Because if we look back at Motorola, they probably did the same thing, right? They was in Texas. But when you look at the local talent, well, for every phone, you got to look at how much it's going to cost to build that phone, which means for the American wages, you're looking at $15 an hour or more, and a lot of people, they're going to want a little bit more than that $15 an hour range, especially if you're closer to the cities. On top of that, health benefits, sick pay, time that you lose for sick wages, or for people not being at work. All of that is going to be added on to the cost of the phone. And then you ask the question, how much will that phone cost? And if you take that phone, what it will cost, will it be able to give us a flagship phone that is equivalent to that of a Samsung, of a OnePlus, or some of these higher spec phones at a price that makes sense? And those are the questions we have to ask. And it brings back when we look at what we say value, right? What we say is a valuable, or what we define value when it comes to smartphones. Is it going to give me the most bang for the buck? Which is why, for me, OnePlus continues to be appealing. Because when I look at Samsung, well, manufacturers-wise or hardware-wise, I love their hardware. I mean, I respect what they're doing with the Fold. I'm respecting what they're doing with their Note. I love what Samsung do when it comes to hardware innovation. I just don't like their software. I want to see more of the stock Android software. I want to get swift updates. And I'm not going to get that with Samsung because, well, for Samsung, they made it clear that's not their stick. They want to have their software experience in the way they want it, and they want to gear it around their Samsung software, their TouchWiz software, and that's how it is. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. And for the most part, a lot of people are still gravitating to Samsung because a lot more people not really. Well, when you look at the what stock Android brings, especially as of late on the Pixel, you can't always say, or you can't quite say it's really that much better in every sense of the matter. Especially when you see some of the other phone manufacturers out there able to provide a lot of the same software experience. And just because it's not on the exact same build, for the most part, most people don't care. But when I go to Google, it reminds me of why, in a way, I'm kind of hating Google as of late. Yeah, they give me the software experience I love, but I'm hating the hardware they're giving me. And this is where, for me, why OnePlus is a winner in my book, because it fit right there. I'm getting the hardware I want and the software experience I want. Maybe not quite the camera, but you know what? We found ways around that. And is there ever going to be a way we can ever get an American company to work here? And as I start looking at it and I start brainstorming, I do think that there needs to be some way we can get some help. And I say that because, well, as much as we talk about OnePlus and how well they're doing, well, let's be honest. They're doing so in a place where, competitive-wise, people have argued it's an unfair advantage. Why? Well, let's start with China's intellectual property, infringing on other companies' property. So, and I've actually talked to people about this and had a big discussion about this and how this seemed to work and why people are having problems with it. So let's kind of give you a background what goes on at least on as far as why people are complaining, or a lot of American manufacturers are complaining about China's unfair practices and why it's costing them money. So let's start with joint venture. So a lot of times, companies want to do business in China. What they'll do, they'll go overseas and they'll have like a little joint venture going on where, their talent is sharing some information with them, getting them up to speed, working together. And then out of nowhere, after this little venture arrangement that seemed to be going successful, some of things are happening. A lot of the information that's being shared are being leaked to other companies. Or they'll just out of nowhere just say, you know what, this is not working. We're done. And they'll take all of that information from what they gathered from this American company that shared this information, and they'll go build their own companies with it. So pretty much they're basically getting the talent or from American companies or these other companies, tech companies that pretty much share their talent, teaching them how to do things. And then were they thinking they're doing so in good faith and doing so in a way that benefits both? Well, the idea is not benefiting both, because if they say the joint venture is not working, they cut it off, and then they just took all the information that they learned and go use it to reverse engineer into making products and devices that they're then able to sell back to the American people at a cheaper price than what these companies have done. Yeah, it puts them in a disadvantage because, when you look at what Samsung and Apple, part of what is built into the cost of a phone is, at the end of the day, research. Coming up with these processors, the software, and all the things it takes to make your phone run smooth. Well, it takes time. It takes a lot of smart engineers putting that information together. And then when you finally get it together, you finally put all that work into years and years and years of work, and you put it together into a device that you're looking to sell. And if you share that with someone and they basically spent nothing for that information and took that to put it in their product, it costs them nothing. It costs them no labor. And yeah, they can sell it at a cheaper price. And it does make sense why people are saying that this really is an unfair advantage when it comes to a lot of the practice that's going on in China. Especially when you look at some of the counterfeit goods. I mean, you look at a lot of the things that, people been joking about it for years. This bootleg Gucci bag that I got from China. This bootleg iPhone I got from China. When the Samsung first came out, I made fun of the fact that, man, it just looked like a Chinese knockoff of an iPhone. Because when the first Samsung Galaxy first came out, the Galaxy S1, that's basically how it looked, like a Chinese knockoff of an iPhone, except it ran Android. And, as much as I, had an issue with Apple actually having all these lawsuits suing everybody, for the first Samsung Galaxy, I actually kind of saw where Apple was coming from, because it really did look like a knockoff version of their phone. And so as you see, American companies having to deal with the labor costs of what it would take to put their products out there and build their software, and Chinese company not having that same issue as far as on their side, and able to take their products and sell it here to the States and make about as much as some of these companies would make. It makes a sense while people are saying it's not truly a level playing field, and we're asking for an American company to be able to compete with a company in another country that, when you think about it, they're not on the same field. They are not having the same standards to comply with. And really, none of us here in America are saying that we want to see American companies be, downgraded to where we're working people like over in China. We want people to have fair wages. We want there to be fair labor practices. Now, we can't force other countries to do that. No. But you do want there to be a way where if those companies are going to bring their products here, you kind of level the playing field by, well, slapping tariffs on it. Now, some will say, all right, look, you're missing the simple fact that when it comes to all these products and that we're dealing with smartphones and everything, chips and all this stuff, not everything is built here in America. We are getting stuff from other countries, and you look at what iPhone is built, you look at where, your average phone, your Google phones, all your phones are built. They're not built here in the States. They may be thought up as here in the States. They may be getting the software from here in the States. But all that stuff is being done overseas because they can do it at a cheaper price and then sell it to you at a price that, yeah, can make them a profit. So you're kind of being hypocritical here when you're trying to say we need to, slap tariffs on this and level the playing field. And that brings me back to the biggest challenge that I'm seeing with ever having an American smartphone company is that how are we ever going to be able to have a company that is going to be able to provide similar, if not better, hardware specs, hardware experience, or software experience to the competition at a price that people are going to be willing to pay for? And it looks like when we look at companies that tried in the past, they weren't able to figure that out. Motorola haven't been able to figure that out. And that goes back to the question, do we really want an American smartphone company? And when I say do we want it, I'm not talking about is it something that sounds good to say on TV, or it sounds good because, we're proud Americans, we're proud of our companies, you're about helping out your fellow man, you're about uplifting your fellow neighbor, you want to see them succeed, you want to see us as a nation or as a country succeed, all of those things that sounds good, But at the end of the day, are we willing to open our wallets and pay for that? And the reality, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that if we, quote, level the playing field, that will make people quite happy. As far as if leveling the playing field means that all we did was take out the cheap smartphones and we allowed these companies like Apple and Samsung to get out of control with these phones that are just costing, even more, where we found a way to get to $2,000 smartphones and those are the new norm. We're not wanting that. But at the same time, we're wanting a smartphone made by America that almost rivals that of the OnePlus, where we're seeing phones getting better and phones providing a better experience. But phones that are competing with the market and making the price of the smartphones competitive, not to the point of where it's getting out of control, but where it's starting to control some of the prices, where people are saying, I don't need to spend $2,000 for your phone when there's a phone over here that I can get for half of that. And it's just as good. We want to see that here in the States. But the reality is, how are we going to be able to do that when, you got labor costs, you got a different way of doing business here in the States than we're doing overseas? And is that ever going to be possible? And for me personally, I would like to see that. I do think there's a way to do it, but I think it's going to be challenging because, if you're going to pay the wages that we want out of people, and we're going to demand that type of, quantity and quality, you ain't going to be able to hire as many people as you would maybe overseas. For every maybe one American, you can probably hire 10 to 15 people in China to do the same job. And the question is, can the one American here outperform, outproduce the 15 over there? And if we can't, then that put us at a disadvantage because, we saw the issues when it comes to a brand new smartphone. You put a smartphone out there and you don't have the quantity available for people to buy it. You don't have you don't have everything you need. At the end of the day, you got this new phone here, or you got this demand here, but you can't meet it. And people are not going to stick around too long waiting for you to get your new phone because when it comes to smartphone technology, it is constantly evolving. It's moving fast. And if you're not ready, all it takes is 2 or 3 months before another company have figured out or came out with their product and everybody done moved on.